I got to turn on the mic. All right, welcome. It is 4 o'clock and we will have a special board meeting of the Boise School District on February 18th. So I would like to go ahead and call that meeting to order. And Clerk Mast, will you do a roll call?
Trustee Doan?
Here.
Trustee Esty?
Here.
Here. Trustee Greeley? Here. Trustee Gregory?
Here.
Trustee Langley?
Here.
Trustee Oppenheimer?
Here.
Trustee Wagers?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I'd like to remind all the trustees and everyone, within the Boise School District, we work by certain core values, and we will run this meeting and such. They include respect, dignity, honesty, responsibility, and teamwork. And we take those very seriously, and it's part of what helps make our school district great. We will go ahead and go to our one item on the agenda today, and that is the board reopening and exploratory committee update. And we'll go ahead and go with Director Nick Smith.
Thank you, President Wagers and trustees. So I'm going to kick off our presentation today. As you were notified when you received the slide deck yesterday, I will not be going through each slide individually like I have in previous board meetings. But I did want to just tell you in summary that the data is looking good and everything is moving in the right direction with downward trends in the number of positive cases, the cases per 100,000, the number of individuals being quarantined, etc., all moving in the right direction. In addition to that, we are currently in the yellow in our community, and that's based off of cases per 100,000 in the community, which is also a great indicator that we've been looking at as well. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions related to the data slides that you've received.
Trustees, any questions on the data slides for Director Smith? I don't hear.
President Wagers, sorry.
Trustee Gregory.
So I was looking at the quarantining numbers and see that we have 559 students currently being quarantined. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm looking at the graph right here.
President Wagers. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
That is correct. We currently have 559 students who are quarantining. So this data that you're looking at today has been updated as of today. The data that you received yesterday. So this does vary just slightly from the data you received yesterday, but this is the most current and accurate data. I updated it as of to about an hour ago.
Thank you, President Wagers. To follow up.
Go ahead, Trustee Gregory.
So Nick, if just check me if my assumptions here aren't correct. Although we've had, for instance, last reporting period, we have 711, then we have 559. Our number of cases do certainly support the fact that all of those do not turn into positive cases.
President Wagers and Trustee Gregory, that is correct. You know, if you look at the total number of cases that we have, it certainly does not substantiate 559 individuals quarantining and those cases ultimately ending up with a positive case.
Okay. Thank you, President Wagers.
Any other questions for Director Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Thamert.
Good afternoon, President Wagers and Board of Trustees. I am here on behalf of the subcommittee that was in charge of stakeholder input. And I wanted to revisit a conversation that we had last Monday on the 8th that Principal Watts was explaining why we chose to use a Google survey to collect our input. Some of the reasons that she mentioned are that, for one, this is the type of survey that we are familiar with. Anytime we've done any surveys during the pandemic, we have used Google surveys to survey information from our parents, guardians, staff, and students. We also like the fact that Google surveys can be translated into many languages. In addition to that, Administrator Stacy Roth, along with many of our English language staff, made the extra effort to reach out to some of our EL families. They were able to talk to more than 200 of those families, and their data was able to be included in the survey results. We also stated that we like to use a Google survey because the data was readily accessible. So as you remember from last week, we told you that you would have preliminary data on Tuesday the 16th. And instead, we were able to provide that data to the board early on Friday evening after the survey closed because the data was so easy to get to. Because we felt that anonymity was important, we did not ask for those that filled out the survey to submit an email address or require an email address in order to fill out the survey. That could have resulted in some people choosing to take the survey more than once. But the purpose of the survey was more to be able to observe trends for our district, and it was definitely not considered to be a vote. And so if you look at the results of the survey, which I started tracking on Monday, the 8th, about 15 minutes after it opened. And I always like to look at the data right away to see how it compares to the data at the end. And as we found with this survey, like we have with most of the surveys that we have conducted, is that the data we trend at the beginning ends up being consistent and is the data we end up with the trends at the end. And so I feel like this survey did exactly what we wanted it to. It provided us with trend data for how parents and guardians, staff, and students feel about this topic. As you can see, we asked for input, and input we did receive. We had about a 40 to 50% participation rate on our survey, which is very high. And you can see from this first screen that we had a very fair representative of people who represent the pre-K to 6 age level and our secondary students. We asked, the first question was, how comfortable are you with not being able to be 6 feet apart in the classroom? As you can see, that 65% of our parents were very comfortable with that. About 35% are not comfortable with that. Our staff was more evenly split, with a little bit more feeling not comfortable, but still pretty close to 50-50. And then our secondary students, about 60% of them are comfortable with less than 6 feet of distancing. We asked, do you support returning to 5 days a week in-person learning, or do you oppose, which would mean that we would stay in the hybrid model for students in pre-K to 6? You can see that our parents support this. About 55% of the respondents supported that. About 20% would like to stay in the hybrid model. As far as our staff goes, about 40% of our staff support being 5 days a week, and about 32% oppose. And then you can see that there were about a quarter of the respondents that did not have students at those grade levels. We asked the same question for students 7 through 12. About 48% of parents support secondary students returning to in-person learning 5 days a week, while 25% would like to remain in hybrid. Our staff was very close to 50-50, about 34% and 36%. And then our secondary students were almost as evenly split as they could be, 50.3% to 49.7%. We asked our staff, what would be your main concern about coming back to 5 days a week? It really is no surprise that the most common response was the volume of building participants that we would have. About 18% said they had no concerns. And the next most popular response was they would not being able to follow all of the public health regulations, which includes those that we can do well, but it is the distancing that we can't guarantee 6 feet. We also received comments from about 30% of those who chose to fill out the survey. And we sent those to you, and there were a lot of pages of comments to go through. And I hope that you did enjoy scrolling through those and getting a feel for the words behind the numbers. What I observed is, we could have asked a Likert scale about how strongly people support or how strongly they oppose. But the subcommittee felt strongly that they wanted people to choose. I support or I oppose. But when you look at the comments, well, we definitely have people who have extreme, or not extreme views, but have views, strong views on both sides. I would say the majority of our comments were thank you for the opportunity to provide my input. And I support the decisions that the district is making and the thoughtful processes that they are going through. So in summary, I would like to thank all of those that participated in our survey, our parents and guardians, our staff and our students. And I would also like to thank the board for the time that you took to look at the survey data and include it as one piece of the information in your decision-making today. Do you guys have any questions about the survey data?
Any trustees have questions for Director Thamer? I don't hear any. Thank you for your efforts on this. I know it was no survey is perfect, but it does give us at least some trend data to look at and where we can understand where some of our community is. And so it's an important thing for us to do, to reach out and have that feedback from our folks, especially 20,000 responses. That's way above what we normally get on surveys. And I appreciate the responses. Obviously, this is something people care about.
Absolutely. Thank you,
President
President.
Wagers, I have a question.
Sure, Trustee Gregory.
Director Thamer, I just wanted to say thank you for just the efficient way that this was rolled out, and thank you for getting the data to us as quickly as possible. And I think that some of the comments that we heard was criticism for having send it to the Boise online parents and students, et cetera. But I believe that your response about trends indicates that was like a manageable and understandable decision to do that. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes, President Ragers and Trustee Gregory. Absolutely. When we send a survey out to all of the email addresses at Infinite Campus, it truly goes to all of the emails at Infinite Campus. Some things to consider is some of the BOSS parents may or may not have chosen to participate because they aren't involved in that decision. But when you look at the volume of responses that we had in the survey, I don't think it would have changed the trends. And I also feel like our district always has operated as an inclusive district. And so all of our members are important, and we like to hear input from all of our patrons, staff, and students.
Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? All right.
Thank you,
Dr.
President Wagers.
Thank
Up
you.
next is Becca Anderson, Director Anderson, and BE President Stephanie Olson. Myers, oh my gosh.
Well, good afternoon. We are just going to talk to you about where the committee landed in terms of recommendations concerning indicators and some other things that we feel are important for a successful and safe return. So one of the things that I feel like our committee felt really strongly about was that that date where we have the immunization of staff, or the majority of staff. And immunization is that 2-week window after you've received your second shot. So that was one thing we felt was really important that needed to go into the decision making. We also, of course, wanted the trend data from the parent, staff, and student survey so that we had that stakeholder input. From the logistics working group, we worked through the kind of the inventory of classrooms and the fact that if those classrooms are not able to reach the 6-foot social distancing, that they'll be utilizing pods to mitigate that risk. The other one that's really important as we go into a return to 5 days a week is additional contact tracers. We really want to support that process. It's worked well for us. And we just know the volume could possibly be something that we need to support our staffs so that they have the resources to do a nice job and continue to do a good job with that. And then finally, what we felt was most important and came out of the data sources committee as far as indicators are those core community data indicators and the district data indicators, and then those threshold criteria. So we're going to look at those in a little more detail. So we did take some time with our working groups to review the new CDC Operational Strategies, and that's linked there. One of the things that was worth noting is that there's a lot of mentioning of ventilation. We have updated all of the HVAC filters. They're MERV 11 or MERV 13. So that was a piece of the puzzle. And we felt like even though it's really not substantially different from the old advice, that we wanted to include the up-to-date recommendations. Then we've also included the community data and indicators that we feel are important to follow. And Tamara Frederickson was kind enough to include the latest next to each of those that you'll see. So we have all of those data indicators. And then finally, Nick Smith already went through the district indicators. But we want to talk a little bit, and I'm going to have Steph talk about this. Why were these the things that we landed on? Why these two slides? Are these the indicators that we recommend you use as the tools in your toolbox? So Steph.
Good afternoon. I think the things that are important for us as we bring a joint committee together is that we land on interests that allow us to move forward to problem solve and make decisions. So in looking at the CDC and looking at our community indicators and looking at our district indicators, those are all numbers that we can wrap our head around and that we can match that information to our interests. And our interests are all about safety for our students and our staff, being predictable, being reliable, being data-driven. And that's where that data comes from, is we're pulling that together so that we can make the best decisions.
Do you have any questions for either of us?
Trustees, any questions? And so maybe I'd just remind the public who's on the call, this is the second time the trustees have been through this information for the most part. So this, and we also had the presentation, we received the presentation yesterday. So we have had the opportunity to go through these, a lot of things. So I don't want it to be perceived that we don't care about what's happening, because we definitely do. But this is information that we've heard several times, and we appreciate it being repeated for us as well, because some of us need to hear things twice.
And I know you don't want me to go at length into HVAC, so.
No, I'm glad we do the HVAC filters, because we have had a lot of questions about that, and to know that we have upgraded all of our buildings that way definitely helps.
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
I just also wanted to comment that having read not only the comments that were posted for the survey, but also the many parents who submitted public comments through Clerk Sharon Mask and through personal emails that came to the board, it's obvious that our parents are watching these indicators as well. And, although I may not have read every single extremely lengthy data laden email, I did read many of them. And it's obvious that our parents are watching these indicators. So it's fitting that these are the ones that we're looking at as well. But I also wanted to comment that even as late as, within this past week, data has changed. And the needle has moved on a number of these indicators and on some of the strategies, operational strategies, et cetera. So thank you to the committee for bringing forward the latest data. And, I just wanted to acknowledge to the public that we're often looking at things that change very quickly and are having to continually weigh those against our interests, which is what we challenge the committee to also do. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. Any other questions for the trustees for Director Anderson or Stephanie Myers? No, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Deputy Superintendent Roberts.
President Wagers, trustees, thank you. And I want to assure everyone that we will post an updated slide deck after this meeting because we did change the data just right. I mean, we wanted to make sure everything was current. As a matter of fact, we met today with Dr. Bramwell and Dr. Nasser, and that's where the information came about the hospital data. Also, last evening, around after everything was posted for the meeting, we did receive a letter from Dr. Nasser, Dr. Bramwell, and Gina Pinnell. And I'd like to read that at this time in all transparency, because I know that they did a large question and answer at our last meeting and had a lot of information they shared. So I wanted to give the updated letter that they've sent to the board. Boise School District Board of Directors, on behalf of St. Luke's and Saint Alphonsus and Central District Health, we would like to express our appreciation for the continued efforts the Boise School District is making to help protect educators and students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our teams appreciate the complexity of decisions you face as district leaders. It is clear you all have a strong desire to protect the health and safety of our community's children, to do your part to help slow the spread of COVID-19, and to ensure that kids, teachers, and staff can return to school as safely as possible. Good progress has been made recently in the fight against COVID-19. Cases in our state are declining, hospital capacity is stable, and a growing number of Idahoans are being vaccinated against the virus. On the other hand, there are still reasons to be cautious. As we shared with you during your February 8th monthly meeting, the recommendation from our perspective is to continue in a hybrid model until we know more about the new, more infectious COVID variants. However, we also understand that there is a broader interest in options that bring students back to school completely in person in March. With this in mind, and in alignment with our shared desire to promote safety and prevent further spread of the virus, we're sharing the following guidance for your information and consideration. We recommend that the most important aspects of your safety plan continue and include strict quarantining for significant exposures when indicated, universal masking, physical distancing to the extent possible, and diligent focus on environmental cleanliness. We know that these measures work in protecting against COVID-19 transmission. If you make the decision to return to school 5 days per week, please ensure these practices are in place and followed. We also ask that you continue to monitor transmission levels within the schools and the community so operational plans can be adjusted if conditions lead to higher risks for students, staff, and families. Thank you for all you are doing in service of youth in our community. Please know that we are all here to provide support and answer your questions as we continue to navigate these challenging times together. Kenny Branwell, MD, Mark Nasser, MD, Gina Pinnell, MPH. And I would like to assure everybody that all of those factors that they listed, we will indeed be following. And in fact, this week, Director Smith alluded to the fact that we went from red category to yellow category in Ada County. We are going to keep our quarantine procedures the same as they have been while we monitor the data trends. Because we're just barely under that 20, we want to make sure that we're following the quarantine guidelines we've been following thus far. So I'm going to turn over to you, Superintendent Dennis.
Superintendent Dennis.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Roberts and President Wagers. If the board would indulge me just a point of personal privilege for just a minute. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to the community for their willingness to share their information with us and their personal stories with us. I think that is a really important piece to the process whenever we are dealing with decisions that are of this magnitude in particular. And so I'd also like to thank the committee. I know that they worked their tails off, meeting in the evenings, talking a lot, discussing a lot of these issues. And a lot of that was on parents' personal time, teachers' personal time. And I don't think that we should go without a very sincere thank you to them. The committee was charged with providing the administration a series of recommendations that must be in place for us to safely reopen 5 days a week. I know that Director Anderson and Ms. Myers went through those 6 recommendations just a few minutes ago. I want to assure the board that all 6 of those are in all of the options that will be presented to you today. The second piece that I'd like to talk about is that our role as an administration after receiving the recommendations was to make sure that any options that were presented to the board contained not only the recommendations from the committee, but all of the other input that we received through this process, whether it is the health input that Deputy Superintendent Roberts just mentioned, whether it is the data that we take a look at. We want to make sure that the boards has all of the information they can have prior to any decision being made. Our job as an administration is to present the how. Your job as the board is now to decide the when. And I think as we go through this today and the conversations continue, we're here as a resource for the board to make sure that you have the information that you need and the questions that you have right now are answered to the best of our ability. And I can promise you that we will do that today. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Deputy Superintendent Roberts to present the options to you with kind of a pros and cons of each individual option.
Thank you, Superintendent Dennis. And before I review the different options for you to consider, I would like to address concerns that have been shared by some of our stakeholders, including some of our lawmakers, regarding the perception that teachers don't want to work. I can assure the board that our teachers have been working full-time, plus many extra hours all year long. Teachers in our district have had to learn how to teach in a whole new way and have had to change how they teach multiple times this school year, all while navigating additional stresses and conditions caused by the pandemic. Please don't misunderstand the results of the staff survey to imply they do not want to work. As a matter of fact, I think most will tell you teaching in hybrid is far more time consuming than teaching fully in person. I just wanted to clarify that piece of the staff survey. Okay, I'm going to move into options now. And again, these slides might look slightly different than what you received last night, and I'll try to explain that as we go through if there's a change from what you saw. Option 1, previously we had a pre-K on there through 2 or pre-K through 12. And actually all of our pre-K students will be back starting the 23rd of this month. And that's due to their class sizes. Their class sizes were small enough that they can physically distance. So those students are coming back. So we didn't include them in these options. So the first option would be to bring back K2 students 5 days a week on March 9th. At that same time, we would recommend bringing back special ed K-12 district program students if you went with this option. March 15th, then we would bring back K-6 students, so the entire elementary level. March 29th, then right after spring break, we would bring back K-12. We have chosen March 9th as the date that we would like to you to consider not bringing anybody back with this plan before then. And that's because that's the date when the majority of our staff will have been immunized by. This plan allows for a phase in for groups to ease the operational impact. So we can watch to see how things are going operationally with quarantining, with buses, with food service. Secondary students, secondary schools would then start the fourth quarter in person because there's a natural break there in courses. The BOSS curriculum, the Boise Online School, is on a quarter system where our traditional schools are on a semester system. So if there was change needing to be made in between those two programs, that would be a better time to look at those changes. All of these options start on Tuesday, not Monday, which might seem kind of odd. However, we had intentionally moved kindergarten registration to March 8th so that it could be on our virtual day. So we would have plenty of time and space to bring those families in and to get them registered. It would be the first time some of those families have been in our buildings and may not understand our protocols and procedures. And we wanted to make sure that we had adequate staff and time to bring those families in and get them registered. Kindergarten registration, by the way, is probably the best day of the entire year. March, so that would allow us to get set up and at optimal distancing. The disadvantage to this option because we had been asked kind of the pros and cons, probably I would say is that families with students across elementary grades would be on a different schedule for the week. And we do have a lot of families that might have a kindergartner and a fourth grader, a first grader and a fifth grader. Okay, option one. Option two, March 9th, bringing back K-6, special education K-12 district program students all at the same time. And then March 29th, again, bringing in everybody, including the secondary. Again, March 9th, because the staff being immunized, we would have a phase in for groups to ease operational impacts, so still having the K-6 separate from the 7-12. This plan would also offer that consistency that I just talked about for elementary families. Again, secondary students starting at a natural break. And again, on March 9th for the kindergarten registration purposes. Option three, well over the time when a majority of our staff would be immunized. This would also give us a longer amount of time to monitor positive COVID cases and quarantines, minimize communication and scheduling concerns for families. So it's pretty simple with this option. Everybody starts on March 29th. And the one disadvantage would be, of course, it would be a delay with bringing back elementary students. And we've heard from a lot of elementary parents about bringing those kids back as soon as possible. Option four, beginning on March 9th, we bring back K-6 5 days a week. And then, of course, that would be the special education district programs as well. And then remaining in hybrid for the remainder of the year. So 7-12 to remain in hybrid. Again, this would be no sooner than March 9th to be bringing the students back in because the staff being immunized, minimize communication and scheduling concerns for families of secondary students. So we have heard from the survey, you saw it was very mixed. A lot of the secondary students would like to maintain the consistency of hybrid. Now, of course, by doing this option, those students that have struggled in hybrid then, of course, would possibly continue to struggle. That would be the disadvantage. This option also would reduce the impact of quarantine numbers because of the distancing, the physical distancing. We would have an easier time and not have to maybe pod or group students if we remained with the 7 through 12 in the hybrid. And at that, I can stand for any questions you may have if I didn't explain those options completely.
Trustees, any clarifying questions on options 1 through 4?
President Wagers.
Trustee Doan.
I have a question for BEA President Myers. My question is, does the BEA support any or they have a preference, number one, and number two, does the BEA support all of these options?
President Wagers and Trustee Doan, thank you for the question. As you can see by the survey results, our teachers, they want to be teaching kids. They want to have the knowledge that their kids are safe and that they're receiving education. The biggest thing is on the survey, and it came out, the concern about the distancing. But I think if we think about what we're doing in a classroom and we're concerned about the safety of our kids and our staff, that to be back in school is what we ultimately want. Is there a preference? I'm not going to make that decision. We have 1,800 members. And I think if you talk to elementary teachers, you'll get something, and you talk to secondary teachers, you'll get something else, because they deal with kids where they are. It's not one size fits all, and it never has been in education.
Follow up, President Wagers.
Go ahead, Trustee Doan.
So I understand you don't have a preference, but do you support, if we choose any of these four, do you support all four of these?
President Wagers and Trustee Doan, I think like Deputy Superintendent Roberts said, there's pros and cons to each of them. Our concern is that our staff are fully immunized if they need to be and if they choose to be. So March 9th is that date. If students are our priority, which they are and they should be, then we need to think about the safety for those students and staff. Option 1 and 2 is a phased-in approach. So those options make sense because that's how we did it in the past, and we can handle things. The pros for that are that we can monitor operationally, we can contact trace. The cons of that are that we have parents in this district, and we have staff in this district who have students at different levels. And so that makes it difficult. Option 3 talks about all coming back after spring break. There's a positive for that because it gives the community more time. It gives the school district more time. But what does that look like for our youngest learners? What does it look like for the learners that are struggling? And option 4 obviously is, everybody back in K-6 on March 9th, and then keeping our secondary kids out hybrid the rest of the year. There are pros and cons for that. So I don't know that I personally have a favorite, but I know that what the interests are in this, for this joint committee, were safety of staff and students and predictability and the ability to move forward.
So is that
Superintendent
a
Dennis, I
yes?
think you have a follow-up.
Is that a yes or a no? Does the BEA support all 4 options?
Because we were all involved on the joint committee, there were BEA members on every subcommittee, we would support all 4 options.
Thank you so much.
Superintendent Dennis, I think you have a comment.
Stephanie, before you sit down, if I could just ask you a quick question, and it's a little bit of a follow-up to Trustee Doan's question. Could you speak a little bit to your comfort level with the process that we went through in order to arrive at the recommendations from the committee?
Sure. President Wagers and Superintendent Dennis. I've been in this district for 25 years. I've been the BEA president now for 8 years, and the process that we use for this joint committee is not unlike any process that we've used for any committee that we've put together. So the power of the committee that is a true joint committee is that you bring them together. You know that there are a variety of people with opinions in that committee. You set the ground rules, you set the norms, and you bring up interests. And that's where we keep bringing up interests about this, because in the process, once you have interests and you run those options back through the interests, then the options make sense. And every single person on that committee then can say, we came up with the interests, our options meet the interests, and then that's how you move forward as a group. So in order to do things in a collaborative way, using the interest-based decision-making model makes sense because you can bring people together and then come out with options that make sense for everybody because their voices were heard. That's what you open up when you have a joint committee and you use interest. Your voices are heard and they're at the table. Yep.
Any other clarifying questions from trustees on the 4 options? Dang, Deputy Superintendent Roberts, I guess you did a good job of giving the pros and cons.
You get lucky once in a while.
Yeah. So so it's been laid out for us. So I guess it's time for the trustees to make a consideration here. So it might be a good time to maybe have a motion, and then we'll go ahead and go into deliberation. I'd like to remind, no matter what motion is made, we could always switch in between at any given time, but we do have to have a starting point.
President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you and echo some of the other trustees to the administration and the committee for bringing forth these 4 options to us. We all know that there is no easy decision here, right? There are folks on all sides of the fence on this, and so. But I do want to thank the thoughtfulness of getting to this to us as quickly as possible, and to all of the folks involved. With that being said, President Wages, I would like to make a motion that we adopt option 2 of the 4 recommendations.
Thank you for the motion, Trustee Oppenheimer. Is there a second? There's a second from Trustee Doan. So it's been moved and seconded. We'll go ahead and open up discussion. Anybody like to start?
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you. I agree with Trustee Oppenheimer and Doan that option 2 is one that I would stand behind. It hits the main things that the majority of staff can be vaccinated. We can meet the CDC guidelines. We're in moderate with a trend going the correct direction for us and for students and families, staff. And I also want to thank Deputy Superintendent Roberts for your words on our teachers and advocating for our teachers. I know you all stand so strongly for our teachers, but I just appreciate you calling that out. That's something that really meant a lot.
Thank you, Trustee Greeley. Other comments from trustees?
President Wagers.
Trustee Esty.
I have a question for Deputy Superintendent Roberts. I'm wondering what strategies the district will employ if we see a spike in cases when we bring everyone back 5 days a week.
President Wagers, Trustee Esty has an excellent question. So we will continue to closely monitor all of the data, the cases, the quarantines, and the operational issues. Our goal would be to first impact maybe a classroom, and from there a school. So if we had to maybe quarantine a classroom, we would do that. Perhaps it could be a grade level, then it could be at the school level. Our goal would not be to shift the entire district again into hybrid or into remote. However, that doesn't mean we won't if we have to. If we see a 4th spike in COVID in our valley, and that is what we're hearing, is that our hospitals are getting to capacity. We're concerned about people's health and the spread. And if we are seeing spread in our schools, we'll deal with that as well. But we will definitely pivot and change as needed.
Thank you.
Follow up on that, President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
So, Deputy Superintendent Roberts, I just wonder if you have a comment on some of the parent input that we received about the pros and cons of something that, like you just described, things spike, we have to go back into virtual, we stay in virtual for, whatever, and then we come back in person, et cetera. So there are those who said we just should stay in virtual till the end of the year, as opposed to coming back now. Do you have any thoughts about that in terms of what the needs are now?
President Wagers, Trustee Gregory, one thing that I do appreciate about the plan is that we still have a few weeks before we would have full-time back in our buildings. And especially with the secondary, which is the area that we wind up having the most quarantines and cases in. I do completely understand the desire of the students and of the staff and of the parents who like us to stay in hybrid for the rest of the year. It has been a roller coaster of a year. However, I do think that what our teachers do best is in-person instruction. And so that's why I guess, that is one of the options that's 3 of the options involve in-person instruction for our 7-12 students. There's so many different aspects that you miss online and with virtual learning. However, I also understand the other argument about the consistency piece. So like I said, the families that are looking for that consistency, that's why they chose the conditions, that why we created that option. Then we also heard from several families saying, my child is not doing well in hybrid. And that's why we have presented an option to you as well that would bring those students back into the building.
President Wade. Superintendent Dennis, follow up.
Just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Deputy Superintendent Roberts was saying, Trustee Gregory, I think it's really important that we acknowledge in all of these options that the person-to-person 6 feet social distancing will not be able to be accomplished in all of our classrooms. The idea behind the podding and is to create the 6 feet social distancing between as many people as we can. So while families may have an opinion as to whether or not the virtual or the hybrid works for their particular family, our district has to provide options for all families to the best of our ability. And I think that given the circumstances that we're in, given the data that we're in, and that we've seen lately, in addition to the fact that, as Deputy Roberts talked about, we have time between the decision tonight and when this is going to be implemented. I think that we're getting, I think sometimes we get the feeling like we're going to open the doors up tomorrow, and that is not the case in any one of these options. So I just wanted to assure the board that we are going to continue to monitor things as things move forward. We're going to continue the process that we have been doing in this district since March of 2020, almost 11 months. Just because the board may choose to start moving forward towards 5 days a week does not mean we're going to stop doing the things that have made this successful for us as we move forward. So I just wanted to add that to what Deputy Roberts was talking about.
So just a
comment.
Go ahead, Trustee Gordon.
I just had a follow-up comment. One is that we have to acknowledge that our class sizes are going to inherently be smaller because we have 4,000 students in the Boise Online School. And so if we have in our mind that our student class size capacity is going to be the max that it was in last February, that is incorrect. So you can reduce the expected population in schools by that 4,000 number. Of course, it'll be, spread throughout the district, but that is a variant that brings the class size amount down. And the other piece that I wanted to comment on is that this challenge and these options and this choice at this time is not characteristic just of Boise School District. This is happening across our state and across our nation. I mean, I have relatives in North Carolina who are going to school hybrid or virtually all year long. I mean, until the end of this school year, they will be virtually. And that is the decision that's already been made, and there's no changing on that. And then we have places in Idaho who have been in school all year in rural districts where the numbers are very small and the cases have been small. So I just so much appreciate the information and the data collection and the analysis that our administrative folks have brought to the board that helps us to understand our situation. But it really is a comfort to me to know that we're not the only board struggling with this decision, and that the opportunity to balance and weigh all of the input is a responsibility that we have to do. And I was just adding up in my mind today that the people who are on my screen right now represent, we are the parents of almost 30 children and the grandparents of almost 25 children. And so we are community and we are volunteers in this. And we take very seriously, and I have to salute my fellow board members who take this responsibility very seriously. And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. I do have one more follow-up on that. So in our health professionals letter, it specifically says operational plans can be adjusted if conditions lead to higher risk for students. And I know we've talked a lot about that. This is an area where we need to be nimble. And for an organization as big as ours to still be nimble, because if we choose to go back 5 days a week, We also have to be able to do what Deputy Superintendent Roberts said. We have to be able to look at individual schools and classrooms, but we also may have to look system-wide as well. So Superintendent Dennis, how do you feel about the nimbleness when it comes to moving quickly when we need to, but moving forward, in a steady direction?
President Wagers, let me just say that I think sometimes nimbleness can be defined by the person who you're talking to. Nimble to me versus nimble to a kindergarten parent are completely different things. What I will say about that is that I believe, and I think we have shown throughout this past year, that if things don't go the way we hope they do or the way we expect them to, that we are more than willing to change direction. I think the situation that we were in November is an illustration of our ability to be nimble. Although it was one of the hardest decisions I know that we had to make as an organization to go back fully virtually, given the circumstances and the data, it was the only thing we could do at that time. So I want to assure the board that that this organization, if nothing else, has learned to adapt as quickly as we can adapt, given the fact that we're talking about 25,000 kids, 5,000 employees, and a community of over 200,000 people. So our impact is large, and we work as quickly and as fast as we can. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, keeping the safety of our public, and whether it's mental health safety or if it's physical health safety, I know you treat that very carefully. Thank you.
President Wagers.
Trustee Langley.
I have two questions. Superintendent Dennis, I wonder if you could answer if there is a big operational difference that allows you to be more safe, or if it's about equal to bring K through 2 versus K through 6 back in.
President Wagers, Trustee Langley, great question. I think this is one of the things that we debated quite a bit as we were developing these options. I think when we went from an all virtual into our hybrid model back in, I believe it was October, we rolled out a K2 and then a 3-6 and then a 7-12 stepped out approach to that. From an operational and a logistical point of view, I don't know that we as an organization saw that as an advantage, other than we got an opportunity to monitor data as we moved through. I think what we saw in that is that the data didn't really change whether or not we had K2 in first and then when compared to when we had all of K6 in. So the short answer to your question is I don't know that there is an operational or a logistical advantage to whether we do the K2 first or whether we do all of K6.
Thank you. And then another question, completely separate, and I'm not sure who to direct this to, but maybe Deputy Superintendent Roberts. You mentioned that we were aligning coming back with the Boise online schools end of the quarter. I believe that you're hinting at that there's an opportunity for flow between the two, in-person learning and online school. Can you talk a little bit about that?
President Wagers, Trustee Langley, absolutely. So yes, there is. We can, on a case-by-case basis, we'd like for our families to work with the principals at their schools if they'd like to look at going to the Boise online school or coming from the Boise online school at that time. It will be trickier for our secondary students because, like I said, the Boise online school is working in a quarter semester system, whereas our traditional schools work in a traditional semester system. But I think there are different options and different things we can do based on the classes the students are taking. If they work with the counselors and the principals in their buildings, we can make some accommodations for them. So we will work to be as flexible as we can be with that.
Thank you.
Other questions or debate between the options. I mean, we can weigh those a little bit within, I mean, we're strictly talking about option 2 at this point. I guess I have one more comment myself on the letter from our health professionals. So just a real quick question, Deputy Superintendent, how often do you meet with the health professionals or talk to them? Just
Well, since last Monday evening alone, we've had 3 or 4 meetings with Dr. Bramwell, 2 with Dr. Nasser. I've spoken on the phone and via text with Gina Pinnell, and then also in a meeting with her yesterday. So a lot.
so you guys are living together. That's great. Well, we take their input very seriously, and I look at this letter, and for me it's a point in time, and that's what they're stuck with dealing with. I mean, they wrote this letter on February 17th, but that doesn't mean they're not going to know what life is like on March 9th, and we don't either. But if we do want to have an opportunity open on March 9th or not, we have to move now, or else we won't even have that opportunity, because it takes us 2 weeks to get food and everything back into the schools. If we stick with option 2, we'd have 6 weeks for the secondary, and that gives us 6 weeks of data on the variants, 6 weeks of data on community spread, where we are on those directions. And if I'm correct, I mean I'm pretty good at calling special meetings anymore, and we could have one on March 5th if we needed to discuss where we are in the community at any given point. So I guess even if we do pass one of these options, that doesn't mean it's the end all at that point, because we still have the ability to go in and influence as necessary. What it does give us is it gives us the opportunity to move in that direction and hopefully find a path forward. I mean, right now with the way the numbers are going, it's awesome, but we've thought that before with this virus, and it turns out we were wrong a few times, as everybody has been. Do you have either one of you have any comments on the doctors? I mean, I shouldn't say the doctors, the health professionals.
President Wagers, if you don't mind me weighing in on this, and I appreciate the words that you just used, because I think that's a really important point. Our conversations with the health professionals are always honest, and I want to be crystal clear about that. We value their input, and we believe them when they tell us things. So if you read the letter, and I appreciate Deputy Superintendent Roberts reading that into the record, I want to assure the board that the recommendations that they made in that letter are included in all 4 of these options. So even though they may say at this stage they're recommending us stay in hybrid, they recognize the fact that our mitigation strategies, and they have reviewed our plans, will help keep us as safe as we can be. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate their efforts. I think Kenny said it really well last time when he talked about the fact that he has another job other than just consulting with the Boise School District. Dr. Bramwell and Dr. Nasser have done a fabulous job of working with us. And frankly, Central District Health and Gina Pinnell has been a huge guide and resource for us. So that's, I guess, what I wanted to add to your statement.
Thank you, Superintendent Dennis. Any other comments on option 2 or debate on why we would pick this one from any of the trustees? I don't see any yellow squares coming up. So I guess that means we're ready to actually go to a vote on option 2. And since we changed our protocol a little bit, we are definitely going to do roll call votes from now on, just so everybody knows it's clear. So I'm going to go ahead and let the clerk call the roll for a vote on. And the motion was to adopt option 2 for entry into re-entry into 5. I guess a staged entry into 5 days a week school.
Trustee Doan,
Aye.
Trustee Esty,
Aye.
Trustee Greeley.
Aye.
Trustee Gregory.
Aye.
Trustee Langley.
Aye.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Aye.
Trustee Wagers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We have a unanimous vote. I would like to thank, at the end of that, thank the trustees for the amount of time and just thoughtfulness that goes into this process for us. What is now an hour-long meeting, I think this week has probably required each trustee at a minimum of 10 hours of work and time reading input, and that's at a bare minimum. And then the amount of work the administration has gone through to make this happen. We are very blessed to have them, this whole gang in here. And then that committee, they ended up getting a little bit of pressure from the board. And I apologize for some of that, but some of it I don't. But they performed and really came through and really provided some thoughtful options and a thoughtful process for us. And sometimes I think trustees don't always like thoughtful process. They want stuff to happen. But it turns out that's the best thing for the district, and the best thing for our stakeholders is a thoughtful process. And we learn that time after time. I'd also like just to remind our constituents, this doesn't mean that this is exactly what's going to happen at this point. It's a plan, and it's a good plan, and it's given us the opportunity to develop a plan. And without a good plan, we end up in a knee-jerk situation, and that is not always the best for the district, especially as with an organization as large as this. So thank you to all. And thank you to the public. I know half of you aren't going to be happy with this decision, and half of you are. But we do care, and we are paying attention, and we will continue on a thoughtful process. Any other comments from trustees?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory?
I would again encourage people to recognize that they can reach out to their principals with discussions of specific concerns. And, don't be afraid to go and have a conversation with your principal. They are interested in individuals, and at that level, they know their families and they know their students. So, if you have concerns, please reach out to your principals. And we continue to support families through our community centers and community school centers and, our programs that are designed to help and support families. So your counselors are available at your schools to help and talk with families as well.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. Any other quick comments? No. So we will go ahead and move on to board superintendent comments. Are there any comments from the board or superintendent?
President Wagers.
Trustee Doan.
President Wagers and board, I would like to let everybody know and announce that I will be at the next regular board meeting on March 8th. I have been offered and accepted the fire chief position in Gig Harbor, Washington. And I will next now, while everybody's here, to just thank you. This has been such a joy to be on this board and be part of this team. And so I will be submitting it, and you'll get.
Well, that is bittersweet news for us, Trustee Doan. You have become a valuable member of this team. We will miss you, but we are also happy for you. You get a chance to start a new chapter of your life, and I hope it's a great one. So, but we appreciate your service for sure, and the community does as well.
President Wagers.
Superintendent Dennis.
I would just like to also thank Trustee Doan for everything he has done for this district, and he has been a very valuable member of our team. And as President Wagers said, it's bittersweet for us But thank you so much for your efforts for the kids in this district. So thank you.
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I'd also like to tell Trustee Doan, I can say that for a little bit while longer. Thank you for stepping forward in the appointment process and bringing with it your expertise and experience and your voice, and willing to engage in a process different than the pools that you were swimming in before. And I hope that you take with you a positive experience from being in the educational side of things, from the trustee point of view. All communities need this kind of engagement, and we wish you the very best in a new position and a new community, and an opportunity to carry your influence far and wide. Congratulations on another opportunity, but thank you so much for your service in our district.
President Wagers.
Okay.
President
Well,
Wagers.
oh,
Sorry.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Trustee Doan, I also want to, first of all, say congratulations, and sad for us because you, for all of the year, I mean, you grew up here in Boise and you have been instrumental in everything that you've done, every position that you've been in Boise, and you've served this community so well. And I will certainly miss not only your perspective and your voice here on the school board, but also missing you as a friend, and your family has been really important to our family. So best of luck to you and best wishes, and we will certainly miss you. So thank you for everything you've done.
Well, guess what time it is, Trustee Doan?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
It's been moved by Trustee Doan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Gregory. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, everybody. Thank you very much. We will see you on the March 8th board meeting. Hopefully not before, but you never know. Have a good evening.
Hi, Dennis.